recovery can mean several things. For example, it can be the body returning back to the resting levels, and it's also the resynthesis of energy sources, so you're able to exercise again. Finally, the final way your body recovers is by repairing damage caused to the muscles after training or performing. During recovery, there are different stages. During the lactic recovery, all the ATP-PC is resynthesized. During lactic acid recovery, the glycogen store is resynthesized. A 100-meter run and a marathon runner will recover in different ways. Because a 100-meter runner didn't use glycogen, it doesn't need to wait a long time for its energy to resynthesize, as it only used ATP-PC. However, a marathon runner may need to wait days for its glycogen source to fully recover. As you can see from the graph, the oxygen deficit and EPOC recovery stages are different depending on how strenuous the exercise is. For example, when the athlete is undergoing heavy exercise, the oxygen deficit is larger. This is because he or she has used all of its aerobic energy sources up and has to start respiring anaerobically quite quickly. However, this is different to light exercise, as the oxygen deficit is much smaller. This is because the athlete was able to respire aerobically for much longer in light exercise until it needed to begin respiring anaerobically. The most notable difference is the size of the EPOC. The fast component of EPOC, or the lactic part, is a lot larger in heavy exercise compared to light exercise. This could be because in light exercise not all of the ATP-PC was used up. If this was the case, the lactic part of EPOC would have been extremely fast. However, if all the ATP-PC stores were used up, which looks like they were in heavy exercise, the lactic part of the EPOC will take a little bit longer than it did in light exercise, but it's still fast. It will roughly take 3 minutes for all of the ATP-PC to resynthesize. In the lactic part of the EPOC, myoglobin is also replenished. Finally, in the lactic side of things, this can take up to 1 to 4 litres of oxygen. The lactic acid part of EPOC is a lot larger in the graph because it takes a lot longer amount of time and is a more complex, and the body is now doing more complex tasks. The body is now trying to remove lactic acid as well as trying to maintain ventilation and temperature, finally replenishing glycogen. The size of the lactic acid part of EPOC will differ in the size because the following things will be different: amount of lactic acid in muscles, body temperature, the volume of oxygen required, and finally the amount of glycogen used. In light exercise, the things mentioned above will be lower, which means that EPOC will be faster after light exercise. The values of the things mentioned before will be higher after heavy exercise. That's why the EPOC is larger, as more time is needed to complete the EPOC process. The lactic acid part of EPOC can take from 1 hour to days to fully complete, and by looking at the graph you can see what one took longer. The ventilation values differ from 5 to 8 litres. The light exercise was pretty close to 5 litres and heavy exercise was closer to 8. Breathing gradually decreases because the rate of breathing is still elevated following exercise. Breathing gradually decreases because the rate of breathing is still elevated following exercise. Also, the heat production will be higher because the body's core temperature is still elevated after exercise. During a football match, all of the energy systems will be active, as there's many different movement types throughout the game. First of all, the ATP-PC system will be active when players are sprinting after the ball, when we're just chasing after it or trying to recover from a mistake. Players can do several sprints throughout a game because during the periods of the game when they're less active, i.e. walking and jogging, the ATP-PC will be resynthesized. The glycolytic system will be active, as there could be a period in the game where the player is constantly moving at a moderate intensity. Finally, the aerobic system will be active, as the players could be playing 90 minutes, as their body will need oxygen to be able to play this long without fatiguing. Players may get energy from drinks such as Lucozade throughout games, as these contain water and carbs, which shown to be successful in long periods of exercise to keep the body going. Another way players can replenish their energy system is by eating gels, which is high in carbs. As players will be playing for a long period of time, it's likely that lactic acid will build up in the muscles to the later stages of the game. This will cause pain in the muscles, which can lead to the players being subbed off Basketball is another game which will be used in all three energy systems. However, it's likely that the ATP-PC system is the dominant system in this case, which is completely different to football. It's most dominant because basketball has many fast sprints and many fast breaks, and there'll be many timeouts for players to allow the ATP-PC to replenish. For football, the fast component of EPOC will recover faster as there are a lot less sprints compared to basketball since it's a high-intensity sport, which means that after a whole game, ATP-PC should be resynthesized faster after football compared to a basketball game. However, this is different for the lactic acid part of EPOC, because in football you are constantly jogging, which means you are using the aerobic system for most of the time, which means more glycogen will be depleted playing football compared to basketball. Ultimately, the recovery time for the lactic acid part of EPOC will be faster for a basketball player as they deplete less glycogen stores, so they don't need to wait as long for it all to be restored again. Delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS, is essentially the pain and suffering you feel in the muscles 24 hours to 72 hours after exercise. DOMS is mostly associated with strenuous exercise, such as heavy lifting in the gym, or a really common example, pain in the legs after a football match or rugby match. After exercise, an active cool down is really important because it will allow more oxygen in the system. After exercise, as well as removing lactic acid over time, which could have caused pain inside the muscles. Another reason why an active cool down is essential is because it maintains the circulation around the body. Before exercise, many athletes have a warm-up. This is because it speeds up recovery as oxygen is being delivered at a high level. Ultimately, this will minimise the oxygen deficit, so the aerobic system will be working as long as possible before the anaerobic system has to take over. Finally, another recovery strategy is to have a good diet and have good nutrition. Consuming more carbs, glucose, glycogen and protein can delay fatigue and also speed up recovery.